Alright, hello, this is Philip Steiger at thebest3d.com, and we just released another version of PD Artist, Project Dog Waffle Professional Artist Edition, which means the one without animation. You can see the animation menu is not here. This is Artist version 8.2c. Let's check the version right here. Skyox Egret is the base core release on this, and it's 8.2c. We had a 8.2b release the other week, but found a little glitch on the Windows XP, and I wanted to make sure we can fix that. So now we have a 8.2c, and that's the official 8.2 release for the Artist Edition. If you have already Artist 8.0, this will be a free update for you, and you should already have by now an email in your inbox with the details to download that. Now, what I want to do is kind of recap where we are with this. There is a lot of things to talk about, and I don't think we'll cover everything nearly enough, probably 1% of it all. You can see this is primarily a paint program, but it has some great features for special effects, lots of filters, different techniques for selections and masks. A menu that's dedicated to brushes, particularly custom brushes as we call them. These are potentially large image-based brushes, and then tools for manipulating your images as well. One of the first things I want you to see is that under the menu, the window menu, there is a settings panel, and in there you can verify how many threads you have on your core. If you are on a dual core machine or on a quad core, you'll see that here. I am on a Windows 7 Home Premium, I believe, running on a Intel processor. This is a 4 with hyperthreading, gives me 8 threads, 8 cores, or 8 logical cores. So pretty fast. It's not the latest generation anymore. I think this is the second generation. But one of the key things you want to see is that GPU is available. It is supported on my system. I have a fairly decent graphics card. Thank you, NVIDIA. I also can, if for some reason it doesn't work, I can disable that. So make sure that you test some of the filters that we'll talk about. And if you see any glitches or any issues with your graphics card, then maybe you'll want to disable the use of the GPU and simply use the performance you have on your computer main processor, main chip. There's a benchmark here that can tell you how much faster things are if you use the GPU. Let's leave that for you to try. Another thing you can do also here is how much memory you want to dedicate to undo. I'm going to go to the maximum here. I have, I think, 8 or 16 gigabytes of RAM on my laptop. This is still a 32-bit application though, so you can't really go into using gigabytes of RAM for undo. We'll use the 256, and let's get started here. Let's use that. Let's become familiar with just some of the main features. All right, so we have a context bar below the menu bar. The context bar will change based on what tool you click. And so you see some of the tools that I can select here, and as I'm going through them, the context bar will change. Let's go to the first tool here. That's the brush tool. And by the way, I'm looking at the floating tool panel here on a single column. That's another thing you'll want to customize. You can go to the window menu and change the layout to see the sidebar on the left, on the right. That's the sidebar over here. You can have it on the left if you prefer. Floating bar is independent of that, but that one too could be stuck to it. So you could do a floating toolbar, or you could have the toolbar on the left or on the right side. For instance, you can have it here stuck along the left side, and then this one could still be going back to the right. Let's do that. Let's do the sidebar on the right, and we got this one here not floating but really stuck. Minimalistic if you want to make as much space available as possible to your actual painting that you will see here. So the first tool will show you options for some of the built-in brushes. Some of them are custom brushes as well. Usually when they are large, something like the large loaded oil, some of these will typically be based on a fairly large image that's affecting as you're painting. And so you can select a different color, you can paint with that. Let's say we want to have some of the totally oils. Let's see, there it is, kind of something that will smear and drag along the existing paint. So there's a lot of different types of brushes to explore that are already available here. Bristle brushes, a whole category on those as well. That's great if you start from a photograph and you want to modify it, to paint over it, to make it look like you went with dry brush bristles over that and it was actually a painted piece of artwork. So this menu, by the way, you can also get from the tool brush itself, this icon, when you right click on it. So most of these you can right click and you'll get additional options. Keep that in mind. It's usually a nice discovery exercise here to find new features or new options. Some of them will open some pop-up windows, like the fill tool here will open the fill settings. And if you want to use the fill settings with some sort of a pattern, you'll want to first choose that pattern. There's a whole collection of images. You can of course load your own, choose your own images. Let's take this one here with the flower. And when you click on that now, as long as you hold it, it will show that it's what it appears like when it's being tiled. And so these happen to be tileable small images. You can now use the pattern fill and fill this area all around it. You could also use a warp fill or some other techniques. Let's go do an undo and try different, and so that will basically look somewhat different. And let's go and see perhaps also some, while we're here in the gradient fill, there's some different ways to fill a gradient in here. That gradient right now is this one that you see here. You can click on gradients here to see a whole choice of different gradients, and in fact you see that here too, to pull down. That will bring it up here. So you can use the fill gradients for a lot of different effects. One would be perhaps to do some sort of a fancy background sky or sunset looks. I still have a little bit of, let's zoom in here, I still have a little bit of paper texture showing here. That's because the prior brush I was using had paper texture enabled, and that would be up here in the previews. The middle one, you can turn that paper texture off. So let's go undo and reapply that fill. Now you have a nice smooth gradient going through that. So let's see what else we have in terms of brushes. Back to the brushes, there are lots of different types of brushes. There's a category of brush that's particle brushes, and we actually have some of them available right here as a shortcut, something like the genie effect. But there are many more particle brushes, and you might want to open this one here. This is the open the particle panel. So that one you can tuck down if you want to keep it around for a while. There are lots of different types of brushes. We've seen the bristle brushes briefly. That's actually where you can do a little bit more detailed adjustment of what these bristles look like. There's orbicals. These are orbiting particles, and essentially these are flying around your brush as you're painting with it in 3D. So it leaves a very different trail and impression on your background. That's something definitely worth experimenting with and playing and finding out how late you can get into the day or into the night as you're playing with that. Let's see particle brushes. That's where it actually all started, with the particle brushes. We have all sorts of particles here. Let's go click the load button and try genie effect is what we currently have. Let's do the baddie grass, one of my favorites, to do kind of a grass that gets shaded to the dark side, so you can give it a little bit of a sunlit look. It's nice and bright on the top side. And that's one thing that you can do with particles. Now there is a category of particles here, the foliage, which goes beyond it, and this is a rules-based particle system in which you can have a rules library here and define a number of rules. And so there are a number of rules you can go through, and each of these rules define what happens next in the branch as it goes from the root to the main trunk of the tree in two different parts. And so with that we have a whole categories of trees and bushes and other types of creatures or growth that we can generate with that. And you just draw around a little bit here and you let it go, and then maybe wait for a post render. There's all sorts of shading options and other things. You can also have this render to the alpha. You can create the alpha channel for the selection mask, so that's typically something that you would use in this manner. If you want to create an asset for game or for compositing in a 3D or in some other imaging paint program, you can now lift this up into the custom brush. The selection mask is already there, so you can go and pick it up, use the selected as a brush. Control B is a nice shortcut for that. And when you do that, let's say we disable the brush painting tool, the particle, and we go into previewing. This PRV here lets you preview the brush as you move it around, and that's assuming it is a custom brush. So while you have that, you can now see that you can composite that any place you want. So that's where you would stamp it down or export that. If you want to put that into a PNG file, you go and save it and export it out to a PNG file. So something like this, you would go to Targa. That would be our default format, and it will ask you what format, what depth you want, bit depth, 16-bit, 32-bit, whatnot. But PNG is another format you could use for that, and then that way you can use that image in some other programs. So for compositing, even with video and animation tools. So what else is really cool with this new version? 8.2, of course, centers on API on using the GPU. And so one thing that we have done a lot, and you've seen some examples on the website, no doubt, is you can start with something like a plasma noise, and perhaps let's just use the default here, and let's go disable the preview of our tree, and let's go and choose one of the newer filters here, the curves filter, and adjust a little bit how this thing evolves in brightness. So you can do something like Mesa, so you can different stages. Ideally you would do perhaps a couple of them. Let's say something like this. Put another one here, and then so you can basically create something that will go up in stages, like staircases, right? And you can see it here. It's got basically it looks like it's quantified to only a few levels. But what the beauty of this is that can represent now something like an elevation map for something like a Grand Canyon area, right? Where it goes in different areas. I mean, you're at the very top level here, and it erodes it down to another generation and another one and another one. So let me store this image quickly. Store this image here, and now use one of the newer improved features, which is in the transform category of the filters, the 3D designer. Alright, so the 3D designer takes that image and looks at it as an elevation map, and there we go. Now we have this, and this is very fast because it is using the GPU. For a couple of reasons too. You see, while I'm doing some manipulation, it is switching to a lower resolution, and when I let go, it switches back to the higher, finer mesh detail. You could turn the shading off if you want to see the wireframe. This is a very fine mesh. You can also turn perspective off, in which case it stays in wireframe though. But you can adjust the perspective a little bit here and do all sorts of other things. Let's see, scale it. Let's reduce the elevation here. It looks a little bit more majestic if it's not too high. And then adjust the tilt angle. And let's see what else. We'd want to go back a little bit. And oh yeah, so we have fog that goes to the background color. And so if you want it clear sky, let's go change the color on the background color. Let's say something like a bluish, foggy, kind of light blue. And then enable the fog, bring it closer, and you'll have that thing disappear in the fog. Another thing you can do is actually have it come in from the ground. There's a ground fog. Now you need to first enable that. So click on the ground fog and say linear or non-linear. That gives you a slightly different evolution. But the ground fog can then come up from the bottom and fill in the valleys. So that's another great feature. There's also two light sources that you can move around and give one a bluish and another one perhaps a reddish tint. Change their position. Let's make it a little bit more reddish. Something like so. And all sorts of other parameters. Pre-filtering makes it a little bit more washed out, almost like it's snowfall on top. And then reduce the pre-filter, and it's going to be much more grainy, and fine details will prevail. So let's see if we can give it one more little detail here. Let's go something like this. So this is one of the great new improvements in PD Artist 8.2, just as much as in the Howler edition, and which is to essentially support some of that rendering with the GPU. It goes quite a bit faster. Painting also uses the GPU in some places, and so there's a lot of things you can do with that. Let's see if we can provide another background here. I'm going to use the magic wand and select the background up here. That's a uniform blue sky. Let's go and render something in there like our own sky. There's a couple of ways you could do that, but let's just use the filter and render the sky. And so we have a sky that we render here. Maybe we need that a little bit more adjusted on the perspective, so that would be the zoom factor a little bit wider, something like so. And then of course we might want to adjust the transition here, so that could be something to explore as well. We have a right click here on the rainbow, and there is a selection tool fader, so that allows us to fade how much selection there actually is, and so that means also it will fade how much of that sky will show through that. So let's go and render the sky again and render it right there with the sky. There it is, and do a quick test on that. And so now you see that it's kind of fading. It has a little bit of a haze into that original sky blue, and that's a good way to start on that as well. All right, so hopefully I got you excited, and just to start and look at PD Pro, Howler, or Artist Edition, wanted to show some of the very basic steps, exploring and starting with this. There's a lot more to try and find out how it works. A lot of different tools. There's a fill tool, there's a linear tool, which is immensely, this is like a universe of itself. There's a lot of capabilities with this tool where you can put a couple of points together and then put move them around and close it, and perhaps use that to do a fill or mask it, or do all sorts of different tricks on that. Even rotoscoping, there is a lot more that can be explored with that. So have a look, enjoy Project Dog Waffle 8.2, and we'll be back with a lot more tutorials and examples showing what's possible. And I'll just finish this little presentation in video by adding a slideshow of some of the artwork that was done in the Howler 8.2 or in the Artist 8.2 edition. Thanks for watching.